Hello everyone, my name is Yakir Kadkoda.
And I am Ilay Goldman.
And we are security researchers from Aqua Security. And in this session, we will demonstrate you several vulnerabilities and flaws that we found in some platforms. So some details about us. Ilay and I have previous experience in penetration testing and red teaming, and we have tried to use this experience in our research mindset. Currently, we are mainly focused on vulnerabilities on the supply chain space and in open source projects.
So we first want to start with our mindset for this research. Here in front of you are 4 famous articles about supply chain attacks. Each one of them had or could have had destructive effects. Now, each attack has its own story behind it. Some began maybe because of a secret exposed in a Docker image file, other because a developer was hacked. The possibilities are endless. We see all the time today publications of a malicious Python package was uploaded to PewPie. And this is a good thing. It's a good step to an aware community. But for us to be aware, we don't just need to seek out malicious packages uploaded to the platform where we consume our dependencies from. We first need to understand what makes an attack a supply chain attack, understand our organization's point of exposure to supply chain attacks, and defend at each point. Because attackers today have many entry points to your organization, from the moment the developer writes the code on his own laptop until the binary is run in production. That is why we want to raise awareness of attacks in each phase of the development flow. So first, a quick recap of the development flow. We first start with the ID, where the developer writes his code. Then we move on to the SEM phase, where the developer and his organization store their code. After that, we're in the registry phase, which includes attacks on the platform where we consume our dependencies from. Then we will arrive to the CI/CD phase. This phase takes everything up to here, combines the code into one artifact, and sometimes even deploy it. After that, we are in the artifacts phase. The artifacts phase is just like the registry phase, depending on your point of view. Are you a consumer of a package or a provider of a package, for example? And finally, the runtime phase, where our code is being executed. We'll speak here about original research that we've conducted in each one of these phases, except the runtime phase, starting with the IDE phase. Here we'll talk about research about Visual Studio Code extensions. So first, why VS Code? There are many code editors, as you can see here, Sublime, IntelliJ, and VS Code. But VS Code is the most popular one. How popular? According to a survey conducted by Stack Overflow, more than 74% of the users use VS Code as their main IDE. Now, VS Code is a strong tool, but its main power comes from its extensions. There are many extensions varying from prettifying the code that you write and ending with Git integration and debug tools. How do you install these extensions? From the marketplace. Just go online, search the extension you want to install, and install it. You can do it from the web interface, as you can see here, or from the VS Code application itself. Now that we know how popular are VS Code and their extensions, I want to shift our view a bit. When I tell you NPM packages, what are the associations that you are getting? So of course, this is a security conference, and probably most of us are thinking about malicious NPM packages. And indeed, when you search Google for malicious NPM packages, you see many results of packages stealing credit cards and tokens. And this is a good thing, the publications, not the malicious packages. But what happens when you search for malicious VS Code extensions? There are hardly any results. There are results about vulnerable extensions, but it's important to state that vulnerable is not malicious, and there are 2 different things. Okay, there aren't any publications about malicious extensions, but what can an extension even do? So the answer is it can do anything the user can do. It runs on the programmer's laptop, can run ransomware, for example, or even use the SSH key of the programmer to connect to the private repositories of his organization in GitHub. So now that we know the dangers of installing a malicious VS Code extensions, we want to see how easy it is to impersonate a popular extension in the marketplace, fooling developers into installing it. For that, we chose Prettier. Prettier is a VS Code extension that is in the top 10 installs in the marketplace. We uploaded our own Prettier with 1T. I want to see the differences and similarities. Let's take a closer look. We can see marked at 1, the URL. There is a slight change, but not many look at the URL. What I really want to focus here are what are marked 2 and 3 in the image. You can see that they are identical. This is because this is the publisher's and the extension's display name property. It does not have to be unique, and you can put in there whatever you want. And for example, here we wrote Prettier with 2 T's. Other than that, there is also the installs and reviews, which is a good measure to understand if the extension is okay or not, but it can be fabricated. Overall, when we look at both these extensions, it's very hard to distinguish which one is the original one and which one is the impersonating one. But do not worry, Microsoft is here to help us. They uploaded a guideline that says, can I trust extensions from the marketplace? Okay, that sounds good. And in there they tell you, here are a few steps that you can take in order to make an informed decision. And one of these steps is, take a look at the repository that is linked to the extension. But we were able to fabricate the repository in the extension to be the same. So this does not help us at all. In Microsoft Defense, other platforms has this flaw as well. Now, up to here, we saw how we can make the land page of the extension seem similar, but how will someone even get to our extension? When you search for Prettier in the marketplace, there are many, many results, and our extension is not even here. But what happens when someone, by mistake, searches for Prettier with 1T? The answer is that our extension is the only result, and you can even see there that in the box, it results with the display name property, Prettier with 2T, making it very hard to distinguish. We took everything into account here. How easy it is to impersonate a popular extension in the marketplace, and what a malicious extension can do on your computer, which is anything, and decided to upload the POC. We uploaded the Prettier with 1T you saw earlier. It just gave us a little ping when it was installed by a developer, and the results are in front of you. In under 48 hours, more than 1,000 developers around the world installed our impersonating extension. Each developer here could have been the entry point for a supply chain attack on his entire organization. Now, just imagine the scenario of a real attacker uploading a real malicious extension. Another flaw I want to talk to you about in the marketplace is the verified sign. When we see this verified sign, the associations that we are getting is that the platform is validated, that the person behind this page is indeed who he claims he is. Let's see an example of the social accounts of LeBron James. We can see we have Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. All of them, he has a verified sign. All of them validated that LeBron James is behind these pages. Now let's look at the verified sign in the marketplace. Here we can see we have SemiCloud here that has an extension with 2 installs, okay, and the verified sign. When we put our mouse on the verified sign, we can see there is a little pop-up that says, SemiCloud has a verified ownership for the domain semicloud.net. Wait, what? Let's look at the requirements to even get a verified sign in the marketplace. You go online, choose the publisher you want to verify, enter an eligible domain, which is just any domain, prove that you own this domain, and that's it. This means that any developer, like SemiCloud here, can receive a verified sign. Sam, if you're present or listening to this recording, nothing personal. Thank you for your contribution to our research. Now, the sharp eyes of you can see that the verified sign location is near the display name property, what we did Prettier with 2Ts before. Just imagine the scenario of an attacker receiving a verified sign and then changing the display name property to Prettier with 2Ts. Probably the most suspecting developers will be fooled by him. Now, what I've showed you here are the requirements for a verified sign before the publication of our research. After the publication, Microsoft added a little note that says, if you change your display name property, your verified badge will be revoked. So this is a good mitigation from the platform to minimize some of the risks. Another good thing we saw as a result of the research is that the real Prettier received a verified sign that did not have before. The problem remains of what this verified sign represents, but it's a good step from the publisher side. Now, we talked here a lot about the marketplace. I want to dig a little deeper into what is an extension. So an extension ends with VSIX, which is just a zip file. And when you unzip this file, you see there are many other files, and in one of them a little magic file. This file is package.json. From where do you remember package.json? From NPM packages. What you need to understand from now on is that a VS Code extension is just like an NPM package, and those are all the dangers of NPM packages, like attacks on dependencies of dependencies. But this is for another session. Now, we talked here before that there are a lot of publications of malicious NPM packages. I want to introduce you to Backstabber. Backstabber is a collection of malicious open source packages, hence including malicious NPM packages, that was collected over the years. Here is how it looks like. It has many details about different malicious packages, including the objective of the package, like stealing tokens, environment variables, and the method of attack, like typo squatting. Here's an example of such a package. You can see the code takes the environment variable of the process and sends it to the attacker machine, stealing the environment variables of the attacked user. Now, we took a look at many packages like this one in order to search for patterns of malicious NPM packages in order to find malicious VS Code extensions in the marketplace. For that, we used samgrep. Samgrep is a SaaS tool that uses rules in order to search for patterns inside code. Here's a very simple rule that we wrote that just searches for execution commands like exec and eval that happen after an HTTP event, like a GET request. We ran it across the marketplace, and here is the result that we found. You can see that upon installation of the extension, the computer will go to the attacker's machine, make a GET request. From the GET request, take the response data and send it to eval, which is a command execution. This means that when a developer will install this malicious extension, upon installation, the computer will go to the attacker's domain, fetch code, and run it locally. Now, this can be a malicious extension or just a very bad code written by a developer. I can tell you on top of that the domain that you see here was available for everyone to buy when we encountered this extension. This means that even if this is not a malicious extension, an attacker could have bought this domain and attack legitimate users, making it a malicious extension. Either way, we reported it to Microsoft and they removed it from the marketplace, of course. Another thing we need to understand about extensions in the marketplace is that when we upload an extension, it's visible for everyone, and we may, by mistake, leak secrets. We scanned with various scanning tools the marketplace, and here is an example that we have found. You can see that when you open the VSIX of the extension, there are many files, and here there is a little token file. And what this token file holds? Tokens! Tokens to the marketplace itself. This means that when an attacker will get this token, he can publish a malicious extension under the name of an innocent publisher. We found many other tokens like AWS keys and many more. Of course, everything you see here was revoked and reported to the publishers. So, a few mitigation recommendations for the IDE phase of the VS Code extensions. First thing first, the platform's and publishers' responsibility. The platform has responsibility for us, the consumers, especially a platform where anonymous users can upload an extension to minimize our points of exposure. We saw they mitigated some of the risks with the verified sign, but there are many other flaws that need to be taken care of. The publishers also have a responsibility. There is a verified mechanism, apply for it. Help users identify you. Are you a security researcher? There is a brand new world out there of vulnerabilities, secrets, and maybe even malicious activities in the marketplace. Are you an extension developer? Be sure to scan your extensions for vulnerabilities and secrets before you upload them to the marketplace. You may never know which token you may have leaked by mistake, starting a supply chain attack on your organization. Most importantly, we've shown here how we can attack developers even before they write their code. We call it shift left left, attacking the developers. Now, this research was shown on VS Code and the marketplace, but there are many more IDEs and their own marketplace that probably have the same flaws. Okay, we finished with the IDE phase about VS Code, and we're moving on to the SCM phase. Here we'll talk about an attack called repo jacking. So first, what is repo jacking? Let's start with an example. Assume you have an organization called my organization, and within it a repository called my repo. In order for a user to access this repository, he'll need to browse the URL in front of you. Now the organization decided to change their name to a new organization, so the users will need to access the new URL instead. However, what will happen if a user accesses the old URL by mistake? There will be an HTTP redirect and everything will be okay. But now, because the organization changed their name, the my organization name is free for everyone to take. What will happen if an attacker creates the my organization and within it the my repo repository? There will no longer be a redirect, and users that access the old URL of the legitimate repository by mistake will actually access the attacker's repository. This is the core of repo jacking. There are more scenarios like transferring the ownership instead of a rename, but it's all about the same. Now, there are some restrictions deployed by GitHub of the capability of the attacker of opening the old repository name, but just in 2022, there were so many bypasses to these restrictions deployed by GitHub. So as a result, in our research and this presentation, a repository that has a redirect from its old name and the old name is available to take, counted as vulnerable. Nevertheless, all the examples we're going to show here were fully exploitable even with the protections deployed by GitHub. So up to here, we understood that repojacking is just a redirect not happening, right? Let's understand a few exploitation scenarios for this attack. A link in the code to the previous name. This can be when in the code itself, there is a reference to URL of a repository to download the resource, for example, or in a Go module file, a Go module import. Installation guide references. This can be when in a README instructions, there is a reference to the URL of the repository, but when the organization changed their name, they forgot to change the README instructions. We'll see an example of this. And hijackable a link in post across the internet. In scenario of this, someone recommends a specific tool in Stack Overflow, linking a repository. After the answer, the owner of the repository changed the organization name, but of course, the Stack Overflow answer remained the same. Let's see some real-life examples. Here we have a Google project, Google Math Steps, that was probably transferred to their ownership, but they forgot to change the README instructions. Let's take a closer look at the README. Here we can see Google instructs us to do a git clone to the Socratic Math Steps, and not the Google Math Steps. And indeed, when you access this URL, you get redirected to Google Math Steps. However, when an attacker will create a Socratic organization and within it the Math Steps repository, there will no longer be a redirect, and users that follow Google's instructions will actually clone the attacker's repository. Then Google instructs us to do npm install, which will result in remote code execution of the attacker on Google users. We made a POC on this repository. We opened a Socratic organization and within it the MathSteps repository and uploaded the repository to give us a little ping when npm install was executed. We got numerous results of code execution on open source users and developers of big companies. Another example I want to show you here is this install sh script. We can see inside the script there is the download URI, which points to a zip inside the repository that is vulnerable to repojacking. Now, the script downloads this zip locally and unzips it, and from the zip takes the Dominus sh script and executes it. This means that when an attacker will create the YesGraph organization that is in the download URI, the YesGraph organization, and within it the Dominus repository, users that execute the original install sh script will actually download the zip of the attacker and execute the Dominus sh script of the attacker. This is the proof that we control the YesGraph organization, and within it we can open the Dominus repository. Now, a third example I'll show here is just like the Google scenario of README instructions, but it's a special case for us, so I'll show it anyway. You can see in the README instructions, they tell us to download an extension VSIX, which is a VS Code extension. And of course, this link is vulnerable to repojacking. It's from the releases in GitHub. And when an attacker will create the old organization name and within it the repository, there will no longer be a redirect. And users that press this download link will actually download the attacker's VS Code extension. Now, actually, this repository is what led us, our research, to understand what are the dangers of installing a malicious VS Code extensions and the dangers and the flaws in the marketplace that we have shown before. In order for an attacker to exploit this broadly, he needs to know the previous names of repositories. For that, he can use the GHTorrent project. This project records all public activities on public repositories like commits and pull requests. This is a goldmine for researchers and attackers. You can see here of the dataset, there are specific download links of specific years and months. Each link here contains millions of repositories. So what did we do with this information? Nothing beats a good statistic chart. We took a random month, June 2019, and extracted all the repositories named from there. That amounted to 125 million unique repositories. From that, we took a random sample of 1%, which is 1.25 million repositories, and checked each one if it is vulnerable to repojacking. And the result? Approximately 37,000 repositories were vulnerable to repojacking. That is almost 3%. If we apply this stat on the entire of GitHub, out of 100 repositories out there, 3 of them are vulnerable to repo jacking, and we have a way to find the previous name using this dataset. We disclosed our findings to various companies of the examples you saw here and many, many more. Remember, thanks to the dataset, if you change your name anytime in the past, an attacker can find your old name and exploit unchanged references. That being said, we have a few mitigation recommendations we'd like to suggest. Check all the GitHub links in your code now and periodically. You may never know when a Go module, for example, might change their name. Do you want to change your organization name? Sure, do it. But also keep it, just as a placeholder, so an attacker won't be able to acquire it and exploit unchanged references. Do you want to search for vulnerable repositories? Here is a little tip. There is a high possibility of finding such vulnerable repositories around acquisitions and mergers when they rename the organization. Okay, we finished with the ID phase and the SAM phase, and now we're moving on to the registry phase. So, Yakir?
Okay, in this phase, we will demonstrate you vulnerability that we found on NPM and was fixed by them. This vulnerability will demonstrate you the risk for developer. So, what is package planting? In the past, NPM registry allow any user to add any other user as the new owner of malicious packages. And as you can see here, first of all, attacker upload malicious package, and then he add another user he wish as the new maintainer of the malicious package. And this is really simple vector that could be done via the NPM CLI. First of all, attacker use NPM publish in order to publish the package. Then attacker add any user he wish. For example, popular profile like NPM and Facebook profile. And of course, after this, attacker remove himself in order to make the package seem to be more innocent. And this is how the malicious landing page of the package will look like. As you can see, if you or any other developer in your organization somehow encounter this fancy malicious package, you might be fooled into installing it because it seemed to be owned by user with a lot of reputation in the platform. And it was also possible via the NPM website to add another user. But the reason why I'm showing it here is there is another issue. Some of you may notice that when attacker tries to add another user as the new owner of his malicious package, he will get their 2FA status. So we have 2FA information disclosure. Of course, we wrote a script that did this for us, and we get a lot of 2FA status of many popular maintainers on NPM, and we get really interesting statistic about the 2FA status of direct maintainer and indirect maintainer of popular packages. We report our finding to NPM, which say they tracking this issue internally and they actively working on fixing it. And after some months, they release a patch, a confirmation mechanism. So now it's no longer possible. And if you want to add another user as the owner of your package, an email will be sent to their email address and they need to approve it first. There are some lessons that you can learn from the current issue. First of all, if you are using NPM, it might be a good idea to check that all the packages under your scope really belong to your scope, because this vector was possible in the past. And you need to be always suspicious about the ownership of your dependency. Now, I know it sounds obvious and it's easier said than done. So what you can do in order to achieve this? First of all, you can evaluate open source projects by using different sources that are available today, like DevDeps and SocketDev, that actually give you security ranking of different open source projects. And you can also use browser extensions that do this thing for us and actually collect data from different sources. Okay, we are on the CI/CD phase. Here we will show you vulnerability that we found on Travis CI that could put at risk tens of thousands of open source projects. So, our research began after we realized there had been a huge increase among different CI providers over the year. If you think about it, in the past, Jenkins and Travis were the only available CI tools. But now we have GitHub Actions, Circle CI, Azure Pipeline, and more. And we start to notice that many open source projects start to migrate between different CI providers. And sometimes it's possible to find users that decide to move from Travis to GitHub Actions, for example, and is all the infrastructure on Travis to find some secret data. After we read a great article by Aidflow about similar issue, we decided to take our research one step further, and actually we found a lot of tokens of popular projects. While researching the API of Travis, we found that actually one of the API of Travis is vulnerable to IDO, which means attacker could actually get any public log that ever exists in Travis API, and within these logs, actually to search for secrets. And this is how it's look. It's really simple. All attacker needs to do is change the sequence number, and then it will get some random build output. And we found actually that there are more than 770 million available logs of different projects. But we must admit that not all the logs in this range were available. So we keep our research and found another API of Travis that's vulnerable to IDOR. This time there are two interesting parts about this issue. First of all, this sequence number starts from 1, and it will redirect us to some S3 bucket. And this will be the exact same logs as we found in the first method. But now, logs that we found in the first method and were accessible now have become available. So we managed to bypass the restriction and expand our attack surface. And like the repo jacking research, we like a lot of data. So because we're lazy, we decided to take only 1% of the available log, which sum up to around 8 million logs, and then run different scanning tools and our own word list, and then we saw the prize. We got a lot of tokens that related to really popular platforms like GitHub, AWS, Docker Hub. Some of the tokens that we found related to projects with 10 of thousands or star in GitHub. Actually, from only 1% of the log, we found more than 73,000 of different tokens. And in the chart in front of you, you can see the diversity of the token that we found. A lot of tokens for different usages. And it's really important to say that not all the tokens are equal, and some expose you and danger more than others. In order to understand how to use this token, we use the KeyAxe project that contains a lot of tokens and the related API, and this helps us to know how to verify those tokens. Of course, Travis tried to censor some of the tokens that we found, but the diversity of the token and the log were too much to handle. You can see here that only for GitHub token, we found more than 20 different aliases. Okay, so let's connect all we have here. We had a lot of tokens that anyone can access, a way to access restriction log, and a poor rate limiting process, so we get here a really dangerous and critical situation. We report our finding to Travis CI, which responded that this issue is by design and they do not intend to fix it. Great for us. And of course, after our research was widely published, Travis started mitigate the risk and deleted the logs. We also report our finding to respective service provider. All of them were alarmed and initiated a Yakir rotation, and others verified that at least 50% of our findings were still valid. So what we can learn from the current issue? First of all, it might be a good idea to delete any legacy or old component that you have in your infrastructure, because sometimes it can contain logs. And regardless logs, it's important to rotate them periodically. Some of the tokens that we found were 7 years old. It's also important to give your third-party token the only privilege they need, and it might be a good idea to scan any output from your development flow or from any CI that you have with secret scanning tool. And when you do so, try to use different scanning tools because each one of them have their own nuance and their own method. For example, some of them use entropy, some of them use pattern. And in order to get fully visualization of exposed secrets, you need to combine them together. Okay, now we are on the artifact phase. Here we'll demonstrate a vulnerability that we found on NPM that can allow attacker to disclose private package name. So, first of all, what is private package on NPM? NPM registry allows users to upload to the public NPM registry private package. These packages is only available to specific numbers of users and organizations, and as their name suggests, their content and their name should not be available for anyone. The name of private package must consist of 2 parts. First of all, the username, aka the scope, and then the private package name. And what is timing attack? When we refer to timing attack, we refer to a method for attacker to disclose sensitive data from the server only by observing that took the server to respond for different input. Here, for example, attacker could only by observing the time that took the NPM API to respond for specific metadata of private package to figure if the package exists or not. So how NPM is vulnerable to timing attack? Let's assume that attacker want to query NPM API for a specific package that called secret package of an organization that called random organization. Of course, if he will try to do this as an anonymous user, he will not get any result in 404. But the interesting part here is not the 404, and there was any data about this package. The interesting part is the time that took the server to respond. In our research, we found that if attackers make around 5 requests in a row, it's possible to determine if the package exists or not. Basically, if the package exists, the response time will be longer, and if the package doesn't exist, the response time will be shorter and will decrease over time because some caching mechanism on NPM. And if you want more specific data, in our research we found that if the package exists and you try to query NPM API for specific private package, the server will respond after 600 milliseconds, and if the package doesn't exist, the response time will be under 100 milliseconds. So how attacker can use this attack? Let's assume that attacker, by using this method, find a private package that's called a hello world of an organization that's called netest.org. What attacker will try to do is to figure out if there is another package under the public NPM registry without the scope, in order to trick other developers that forget to mention the scope of the package. But in order to deeply understand this, I want to give an example from another platform, Docker Hub. If you know Docker Hub, you know that when you try to upload Docker image, the name of Docker image must consist of 2 parts. First of all, the username, and then the image name. An attacker or anyone cannot upload an image without a scope. The only one that can do it in Docker Hub is actually the Docker Hub team themselves. So we have a scenario that is possible in NPM, but it's not possible in Docker Hub. And this leads us to our first takeaway here. We need a unified security standard between different registries on the supply chain space, because each one of them have their own nuance and mitigations, and the NPM have a lot of them. But if we will combine all of them as community, we actually improve the overall security of the supply chain space. Okay, we disclose our finding to NPM team, which respond that because some architectural limitation, they cannot prevent such attack. So it's still possible. And they even exclude this from their bug bounty program. But the mitigation here is very simple. All that user need to do in order to mitigate the risk here is to create placeholder package under the public NPM registry. And if you want to read more about other attack vectors that related to this issue, there is a really great blog by NPM avoiding substitution attacks. And as a security researcher, it's always a good idea to check for timing attack in other platforms. So let's sum up all the points that we have here. We've shown you a lot of different examples for different phases. We have talked about IDE extension, about repo jacking, package planting, tokens on CI/CDs, and even our attacker can find your private package on NPM. If you think about it, each of the examples were really simple, but their consequences might be catastrophic for some organizations.
You need to ensure security at each stage of the development flow. We've shown here many mitigations for different risks, but sometimes they were very specific to the research that we've shown here on VS Code, for example. You need to understand how your organization fits inside this development flow and do threat modeling to understand the different risks that you are exposed to. Are you a security researcher? Be careful with the POCs that you upload. Do you remember the CTX incident? A security researcher uploaded a malicious Python package to PewPie, stealing environment variables. After there was a lot of traffic regarding this malicious package, he uploaded a blog post that says, "Do not worry, I'm a security researcher, not a malicious actor. I do not intend to do anything with your secrets, and I deleted them." Now, of course, no one can believe anything he says, and now all the organizations need to rotate their secrets and do security evaluations to understand if they were breached by using these secrets. As a security researcher, you need to understand when you upload a POC to NPM, PewPie, or even the marketplace of VS Code, you don't target a single user or a single company. You target the whole open source community. So things can go out of hand very easily and need to be very careful.
And our last point, if you think about it, all the security researchers and the open source community, when we speak about vulnerabilities and attack vectors that are related to supply chain, we are only focused on popular platforms like NPM, Go, and PewPie. But there are so many other registries that sometimes vulnerable to the same issue, but currently they do not get any attention from anyone, and they can expose a lot of organizations to supply chain attacks.
Thanks for listening, everyone. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us there or right now. Thank you.